Good evening, North Jersey. I'm Ed Forbes, Senior Director for News and Engagement for the USA Today Network Atlantic Group, which includes NorthJersey.com and DailyRecord.com. Please allow me to introduce Ari Bursch, a Morristown Baird School senior who has joined our newsroom this spring as an intern. Ari will be hosting a discussion tonight about how North Jersey high school students have navigated the pandemic, and more importantly, what they're looking forward to now as the pandemic appears to be easing. Ari, welcome. Good evening. Over to you.
Thank you, Ed. Good evening. Again, I'm Ari Bursch, and I'll be your host this evening. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the high school experience during the pandemic, from remote learning to varied returns to the classroom to hopes and fears for next fall. Joining me this evening are Ishan Popat, a junior at Mountain Lakes High School, Timshi Troma, a senior at Morristown Baird School, and Manny Shoyambo, a senior at Milburn High School. And we'll start off with a statistic from a recent NPR Ipsos poll, which was that a majority of parents have said that they believe that their children have fallen behind in school during the pandemic and would like their children to receive additional resources in the years to come to catch up. So on that note, could each of the three of you, starting with Manny, tell us a little bit about your learning experience over the past year?
Hi, I'm Manny. I'm from Short Hills, and my learning experience in the past year, I would say, was bittersweet. I think there were pros and cons of the remote experience and also the pre-COVID experience in person. And when my school switched to in-person learning, I had to do some adjustments, and I wasn't used to that. And then when my school did virtual learning, my school had to make some adjustments, and my school wasn't really prepared for those adjustments. And I also wasn't very prepared for those adjustments. So that kind of learning experience of doing virtual learning kind of came to me as a surprise. So for me, that was very challenging.
And Ishan, could you tell us a little bit next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ishan. I'm from Mountain Lakes High School. My learning experience this year has been pretty hectic. I've experienced full remote learning, hybrid learning, and full-time back at school learning. And my school has in-person instruction in the mornings, and in the afternoons are virtual. And I find this to be very difficult for me personally because it's so hard to refocus back at school when you're back at home, and it's just very difficult. And there was just this whole year I had a lot of anxiety with whether I'd get COVID going back to school, and everyone just seems to be struggling with this anxiety. And I would say this year has definitely drained me the most, not just because I'm a junior, but also I'm dealing with virtual learning, in-person learning at the same time and trying to adjust.
And Tim, could you finish us off for this one?
Yeah, so I think my experience was a little bit different than the other two. I was fortunate enough, like you, Ari, to be in person most of the year, barring a few interruptions, mainly because at the beginning of the year, we were fortunate enough to go back to school with masks, with plexiglass, with wiping down desks, with different wipes every time you walk into the room, and another air filtration system that hopefully kept us all safe. But at the same time, in November, we decided to start doing weekly testing, which was a bit of an adjustment for every Friday morning. We had to get there a little bit early to drop off our COVID tests, but it was definitely a sigh of relief for a lot of us that we got to know that everyone, at least for the past week, was COVID-free, and it kind of relieved some of that stress. But it was this constant, you got contact traced, you're out of school for 2 weeks, and we are missing people. So there was both online learning and in-person learning happening at the same time in the same classes, which was a bit of an adjustment as well.
So it seems like the stress over possibly getting the virus itself was almost as much of a stressor as keeping up with schoolwork. And another poll that we've gotten from NBC News shows that over half of students said they felt more stressed, and a very, very small percentage of students said that they felt less stressed during remote learning. So I'd like to pose the question to you. Were you personally more stressed when you were learning remotely? And Manny, could you start us off again on this one?
Yeah, so for me, initially in March 2020, which is when the pandemic really started to get bad in the US. And when my school kind of closed down, I was really excited to begin remote learning for the first time just because, you know, you have the comfort of the home, and it seemed to be easier. And my school district, they basically closed the school for 2 weeks. And then I expected to go back at the end of those 2 weeks, but of course that didn't happen. And we did like months and months of remote learning, even now. So when they said that we wouldn't go to school for 2 weeks, I was really excited because I thought it would be like an extra break, like a 2 week extra school break. And when I did remote learning, overall, it was less stressful and less difficult than in-person learning, mainly for two reasons. One being that I didn't have to take finals. They got rid of finals. But then the other being that most teachers removed assessments and quizzes and tests partly because of cheating, but also because they just weren't prepared to administer tests virtually. And so after a few weeks, I did enjoy the remote learning, but then I started to get tired of it because I found myself having to use technology more often, too often, and I had to use my computer for hours and hours and hours, more than I did before COVID came and we did virtual learning. And all of that was like a lot of strain on my eyes. And then I also had to sit for long periods of time, so that hurt my back. And when I sit for long periods of time, I just tend to get more stressed. And the in-between time between virtual classes, if you didn't get up quickly to walk around, you would end up sitting for hours and hours at a time, which was really annoying. And that kind of led me to being kind of like restless and stressed. And I also missed the social impact or the social interaction that I would get with in-person learning between friends and peers at school. So overall, remote learning was less engaging. It was more difficult to pay attention, to stay motivated in class. So that kind of made it really challenging.
And Tim, could you tell us a little bit now about how you felt learning remotely? Were you more stressed, less stressed?
Yeah, I think that I was certainly at the beginning. I had a bit of a similar reaction to Manny at the beginning because I was like, oh my God, like I don't have to take my bio test on Monday. Like this is great. And then it kind of fell off from there. But still at the same time, I think, less stressed, at least in the spring when we were virtual learning, simply because I think it was a little less rigorous, just as a result of teachers adjusting, like Manny said. And, you know, my dog could walk into the room in the middle of class and he'd walk on the camera and interrupt class. And it was a whole fun experience because the teacher would ask, we'd get derailed for a few minutes. It was great. But then this fall, like I mentioned, people were out a little bit of in-person learning for virtual learning, as well as a whole school at times, but mostly just individual people. And I was out for a little bit after tearing my ACL in soccer. So I was at home after surgery for like 2 weeks. And I just remember the stress in that situation was incredibly high, simply because I was the only one in a lot of my classes that wasn't there. So the teacher would forget about me on Zoom or, you know, just, it wasn't, excuse me. It wasn't the learning environment that I had become accustomed to. It was so much more like disengaged and distanced, literally as well as figuratively, that my stress levels went up, especially when I knew all my peers were in person having fun and I just wasn't because I was at home. But it balances all the time, for sure.
And Ishan, could you wrap us up on this one?
Yeah, unlike the other two, I definitely felt more stressed when learning remotely. It was just very stressful, especially in March, like being at home with with my brother, with my parents, and like us juggling meetings, like being in our own little space at home. That was stressful because I wasn't allowed to go downstairs at certain times to get food and stuff. So that was very stressful. But when fall came around and junior year started, I found that I was having to learn a lot of the material again on my own because what the teacher was saying was not like sticking with me because of all the distractions the home environment has. And on top of learning the material on my own again, I had to keep up with homework and studying for tests and quizzes. And I got tired at home, staying in my bedroom all day, just working. It was just not fun. And I was constantly looking at the screen. My eyes were getting drained, and I was wearing contacts every day, which was not good for me. And I was getting tired much quicker, and it was not a healthy environment for me.
All right. So my next question is actually also about how you were feeling during your learning experience over the last 14, 15 months. But it has to deal with when you went back to in-person learning, which I know is at different times for each of you. So for this one, could you say a little bit about when you went back to in-person learning for the first time since last March? And was it awkward to do so? Were there things that were a little bit different than you were expecting, or were things more the same than you might have thought originally coming back? And could Tim lead us off on this one?
So I went back at the beginning of the 2020-2021 school year, which was September 6th or something like that. And it was a bit of a soft entry for me personally, because I was on campus all the time doing various meetings, having all of this stuff before we got to campus. As senior class president and in a few other roles. So I was just on campus meeting with people, and I saw the preparations being done, be it little arrows on the floor to tell you which way to walk to help traffic flow, or the ventilation system, or plexiglass, or all these other precautions that we took. So once I got back into school a little bit, it was a soft landing, especially with other extracurriculars like theater and sports were certainly an odd correlation, because especially with soccer in the fall, we would take masks off the second we got on the field and then put them back on when we got off. And it seemed a little counterproductive, even though it was certainly a relief to be able to take the mask off and be with your friends and play soccer, even if it wasn't perhaps the best idea, and that policy was changed later. But it was just a matter of, this huge adjustment of, there's so many restrictions now, but I think we were all so glad just to be there. The fact that we were there was a win. And I think that's the most important thing, that even as I've had kids come up to me and complain about this or that, I think we really have gained an appreciation for just the fact of being there and going to school, which we definitely did not have before.
Definitely. Manny, I know you went back a little bit later in the school year. Could you tell us about what it was like for you?
Yeah, so excuse me. For me, it's kind of similar to Timothy. The transition to in-person experience, it was very hectic. Like this year, my school, they had like a 3 cohort in-person option. So they still had a hybrid model, but they had like 3 different cohorts of people coming in. And even before that, it took the school like a while for them to actually open up the school. For the first 3 months, they left the school as all remote. But once they had those 3 cohorts, I returned to in-person learning because I really badly wanted to. I started to get tired of doing the remote learning. And I was really excited to see people that I hadn't seen for almost a year, 6 months, 9 months. And the in-person experience was partially fulfilling, but it was also partially awkward because there was like a small number of people who were in the building. But for the fulfilling part, students who like I normally don't talk with that much, or that I'm not particularly friends with, they were happy to see me. And whenever they saw me in the hall, they were like, "Hi," just because we hadn't seen each other for so long. So whoever you see that you didn't see forever, you would just say hi or talk to a little bit. And I just felt better, being able to walk from class to class instead of just sitting in a chair for long periods of time. And so when we had those 3 cohorts, there was almost no one in school. Like during the days, on average, my typical class, there was 1 to 3 students, including myself. So half of my classes, I was the only student, which was kind of awkward. It was just me and the teacher. And then as the year progressed, they reduced the number of cohorts from 3 to 2. And then there were more people coming in. And then after that, they added an everyday school option where you could go each and every day versus, instead of going like for your separate cohort. And I'm still doing that option right now. So being in front of teachers definitely also helped the experience to be more engaging, just because being in front of them is just easier to absorb material versus like staying at home. So overall, I think that the in-person experience is more like effective and more robust in terms of learning. And again, the social interaction I've definitely enjoyed. It's just really good to be able to see people, because the remote experience, it's a little bit more difficult to do that. So I've definitely, even though there haven't been like a lot of people and most people have done virtual still, I've definitely enjoyed the in-person experience.
Mm-hmm. And Ishan, I know you went back a little bit later on in the year than our other two guests. Could you tell us when you went back and what it was like when you did?
Sure. Yeah, I went back after the first semester had ended for me. So that was around, I'd say, middle to end of January. And it was awkward to do so because I hadn't met these teachers before. I'd seen them in the hallways the year before, but I never engaged with them in person. And it was weird to not just to see their face, but their actual whole bodies. And it was a little awkward to do so to see my friends as well, because normally I just see them on FaceTime. Now I'm seeing them in person. Now I'm talking to them live. And it was awkward, but it was also just very exciting. And I just remember my first day back, and I was so nervous to go back. It was like the first day of school again. And it was very nerve wracking, but it was also really exciting to finally be back in person. And I was just so excited to be back in the classroom with a live teacher and learning with other people as well. And it was just awkward to also see like sanitizing the desks and the plexiglass in the biolab and everything. But I think it was more exciting than it was awkward for me.
Mm-hmm. All right. We're going to shift gears a little bit now and talk about what we are most excited to do going forward as the pandemic recedes and as more people become fully vaccinated and more restrictions are lifted. So I'll pose it this way. What are you most excited to do, school related or not school related, this summer and beyond? I know three of us are going to college, and Ishan, you'll be doing your senior year next year. So what are you most excited with? And we'll start with Ishan in this one.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to finally meet up with my friends and form study groups like we used to do. We always used to go to Starbucks or Panera Bread to do homework together or prepare for a big test before the pandemic. And then this was something that we couldn't do when the pandemic hit us. And now that restrictions are starting to light up and everyone's getting fully vaccinated, we're finally able to go out in public again, and we're finally able to do those study groups again. And we tried to do those study groups over FaceTime and Zoom during the pandemic, and it was successful for sure, but it just wasn't the same as meeting up in person and working together. And I got better vibes working in person than I did working on Zoom, because again, I was just staring at the computer, looking at a person across, like, who's like in a totally different place than me. And it was just very difficult, but it was successful. But I'm very, very excited to be going back and doing those study groups again.
Great. No, that's totally something to be excited about. Having that shared energy between people is one of the things that I think everybody's most excited for as we go on to college or senior year, hopefully in a more normal environment. Manny, could you come up next and tell us what you're most excited for?
Yeah, so for me, there's a few things that I look forward to. And one is like to continue to talk to more people and interact with them. Some people who, because of the pandemic, like I haven't been able to see for a while. So I look forward to being able to meet up with those people. One thing that a lot of high school students probably share with me is being able to travel. My family usually likes to travel at least once a year. So we hope like this summer to be able to travel somewhere. We weren't able to do that this past year, obviously because of the pandemic and like the different things going on. And then I also hope to be able to go to camp this summer. Also, I wasn't able to go to camp because of the pandemic. And then I also hope to like eat with other students during the summer, like from school or just friends from other places. Because like earlier in the year, we weren't really able to do that. We just went to school and went home. But now, like as people, similar to what Ishan said, continue to be vaccinated, it's like easier to be able to meet up. They lifted like a lot of restrictions, so all those things like I look forward to being to be able to do.
Great. And Tim, could you could you tell us a little bit about what you're most excited about?
I think it has to be college. I mean, I know in a normal year, kids are so excited to go to college. Like it's this huge life milestone. It's this whole thing. But I think especially after the year that we've just gone through, I could not be more excited to go to college. And I think that I'm certainly ready to do that now, more than I might have been before. Just because, I think it's been a rough year, just getting in and out of the classroom, and we've talked about it for 20 minutes already. But just after going through all of that, I think I'm just so ready to move on, have a change, start new, but at the same time have this opportunity to come back and see my friends and do all these same things that seem normal. And I think that's the most important thing for me. But I have to say college. I'm going to a whole new state, and it's college, hands down.
Mm-hmm. Tim, to expand on that a little bit, could you tell us where you're going next year and what their plans are for the fall?
Yeah, so I am going to Davidson College in North Carolina, which is a small liberal arts school outside of Charlotte. Excuse me. Have pretty expansive plans just because they are a small liberal arts school. So they had two vaccination clinics already on campus this spring. So a lot of their school community that was already there is vaccinated. Most of the incoming freshmen are vaccinated. So we haven't gotten a ton of info on, what the mask policy is going to be, things like that. But I am going to be in person. I'm going to be in-person learning. I'm going to be in a dorm with all the friends, everything like that. So I think the only question mark is probably masks, but other than that, it seems like it'll be a kind of normal college experience, which is such relief, especially as I think it's just important to point out the college admissions process this year was absolutely insane, with acceptance rates just plummeting at so many schools. And it was definitely so uncertain going into this process and waiting for these decisions to come back. I think that might have been the most stressed I've ever been in my life. So this opportunity to go off to college and to have a normal experience after all of that is just such a relief.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And our other senior, Manny, could you tell your audience a little bit about where you're going and what your hopes are for the fall with their plan?
Yeah, so just to say what college I'm going to BU in Boston. It's like medium-sized number of students, and kind of similar to Timothy. Our college, it requires that like you have to get vaccinated and stuff, and they're planning to do all in person, which I also look forward to. If I was going there like last year and I had to do virtual, I would be so annoyed and so upset, but I guess time just worked correctly, and I'm going there, and it's gonna be all in person. So that's a plus. So I enjoy and look forward to like meeting different people from different backgrounds, different places, because there's gonna be so many different people. I'm a little bit nervous, but everyone else is in the same boat and is probably just as nervous. So that's fine. And then I also like know a few people who are going there, so I can meet up with them. I already have met up with them in the past, and I visited the campus this past spring break. I actually wasn't able to visit the campus for a while because like COVID made it difficult to, but I was able to recently. So I just look forward to that. It's going to be a totally different ball game, a totally different experience from high school, a lot more students. So it's going to be really different, but really exciting.
Sounds good. I'm definitely excited to go as well, and I hope everything goes as planned in the fall. So our last question is a little bit of a segue from that, and I'll pose it like this: are you guys anxious, in the case of our two seniors, to go to a college campus with thousands of students on it, and in your case, Ishan, to return to a high school campus with a few hundred students on it in the fall? Are you anxious about that? Are you I would assume you guys are all excited, but are you anxious in the public health aspect of a return to a full campus? And Ishan, you can lead off on this one.
For sure, I am a little anxious about it because we've only done mornings in person. We haven't had lunch together. We haven't spent the whole day. But New Jersey is getting better. A lot of people are getting vaccinated. I think about 70% of our population is vaccinated, and we're on track. So, and the cases have gone down. So, if the cases were to rise again and a new strain of the vaccine and a new strain appear would come and the vaccine could not fight against it, I would definitely be more anxious than I am right now, but I'm not as anxious as I would have been maybe like a couple of months ago. But definitely excited and a little bit anxious at the same time.
Yeah. Tim, how about you go next?
I'm not that anxious, surprisingly, actually, just because I'm going to such a small school, at least by college standards, and they've taken such large strides to get everyone on their campus already vaccinated and encouraging everyone possible to get vaccinated otherwise, that I think it will be a positive learning environment that I'll just be able to hopefully relax. And I think I'll deal with any challenges as they come, but I'm just so overly optimistic. And yeah, I'm just so looking forward to kind of moving on. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, it will be good. It will be good to have a fresh start next year. And Manny, you have the last word.
Yeah, I feel similar to Timothy. I think that since I've been going to in-person school all this time, it's kind of giving me like a more realistic college experience, because if I was going like to high school virtually ever since last year, no offense to virtual school, but it would make me a little bit more antisocial. So if I went to to college in person all of a sudden, I think like I wouldn't really be used to that, and then I would be more nervous and it would be more difficult to adjust. But I think now, since I've been talking to people, exposed to people, even though there's not that many people, I'm kind of already used to it. So the transition, I don't think will be too large. And I feel like socially positive and socially optimistic just about seeing people, just because I guess I'm like a people person. I like talking to different people. So I think that transition won't be too difficult.
All right. No, I totally agree with you, Manny, and I hope everybody is excited to get back out and about as the vaccines become more widespread, and as hopefully we can return to a greater sense of normal. But with that, we conclude our panel for tonight. I'd like to say a big thank you to our panelists, Ishan, Tim, and Manny, as well as all those at the Daily Record who made this event possible. Ed Forbes, my supervisor and senior director for news and engagement at the Record, as well as Mike Pitagano, video producer and digital developer, as well as Paul Woods, multimedia coordinator. And a final thank you to you all, our viewers, for tuning in tonight. And with that, I will sign off and say good night.